my opening remarks must acknowledge my sense of privilege at undertaking the role of chaplain to the mayor. I love this great city, and a love that deepens the more I learn about its cultural diversity. And part of that rich culture and diversity and part of the greatness of the city lies right here in you good people. The commitment and self-sacrifice that you offer, I acknowledge warmly this evening. How many people in the city will be aware of us meeting here at this time and recognise the time and energy that you give regularly on their behalf, and therefore I believe you are among the people that make the city great. Personally, I look forward to this new chapter in my ministry. It's a ministry that's stretched over 50 years, but this is a steep learning curve, because the only chaplaincy I've been associated with over those years has been hospital chaplaincy. But already I feel very strongly supported by the mayor, whom I in turn will support to the best of my ability. I've been second to read in the agenda, in the early pages of the agenda actually, that hate mail has been perpetrated in recent days, especially since the Brexit referendum. Freedom of speech and expression has been in the news a lot in recent weeks, and some significant people have been speaking out quite eloquently on the subject. During his Templeton Prize acceptance speech, former Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs said, "We have seen on university campuses in Britain and America the abandonment of academic freedom in the name of the right not to be offended." The Daily Telegraph reported that Oxford Professor Timothy Garton Ash told an audience at the Hay Festival that free speech is under pressure and there are small but very vocal groups of people who want to stop debates. On Radio 4, quite recently, the castaway Professor Louise Richardson spoke to the presenter Kirsty Young about becoming Vice-Chancellor of Oxford University amid controversy over whether to remove the statue of Cecil Rhodes, 19th century appearance, and over whether people with certain views should be banned from speaking events. She stressed that universities must address the challenges of ensuring freedom of debate amongst their student communities, and said, "How do we ensure that they appreciate the value of engaging with ideas they find objectionable, trying through reason to change another's mind, while always being open to changing their own? How do we ensure that our students understand the true nature of freedom of inquiry and expression?" Asked what lay behind this wave of caution over potentially offensive speakers, she suggested, and I quote, "It might be partly attributed to the fact that students and young people generally operate in an echo chamber of like-minded people in social media and are less exposed to contrary views. As I see it, it is unhelpful to operate in such echo chambers. There are dangers, of course, in trying to prevent others expressing their views. One is that we lose the ability to counter misinformed opinions. Second is that we may fail to hear a fair view that has an impact on our own. And the third is that we can be tempted to condemn everything about a person because of something they've said or done. It can be a way of attempting to divide everyone simplistically into good or bad and allow ourselves the false comfort of thinking we are nothing other than one of the good guys. As a chaplain, you will probably not be surprised for me to say that the biblical view is that all people contain the image of the divine, but none of us can avoid falling short. Do you agree? Well, answers on a postcard to the mayor's chaplain. So, as we commence this meeting, I believe that this is the place to argue with conviction, but also an agreeable attitude. Disagree agreeably, and above all, listen carefully, because I believe that no one amongst us has a monopoly of truth or wisdom, and a failure to listen may well mean that you miss out on a very important and insightful thought that could be decision-changing, or may I suggest even life
Please can I remember councillors to speak into their microphones so that everyone can hear the contributions made. If the fire alarm goes off, fire exits are located at the back and the front of the council chamber, and please follow instructions to exit from the offices. For wheelchair users and those with mobility issues, please make your way to the safe waiting area on these hillside stairwell. Council officers will be on hand to assist where required. An accessible unisex toilet is located outside the council chamber opposite the members' room. A drinks machine and water are located in the corridor opposite Committee Room 1. Please remember to keep yourselves hydrated properly this afternoon. Cambridge City Council is filming this meeting and a copy will be available to view in the coming days. Finally, could I ask all members to be concise with their contributions and to show respect to their fellow members? Thank you. Agenda item, approval of minutes. Can I approve the minutes of the 3 meetings of the Council held on the 26th of May, which covered the honorary council appointments, the annual meeting and the Midsummer Fair? The Midsummer Fair minute was published online on Monday and is in your information packs. Yes? Mayor's announcements. Apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gillespie. Are there any others? Thank you. Mayor's Day Out. Members are already aware that the annual Mayor's Day Out to Great Yarmouth takes place on Wednesday, 17th of August. If you are interested in volunteering your services to assist on the day, but have not yet let the organisers know, please can you let Lucy Malazzo know by the end of the week. Romsey Mill Golf Day. Romsey Mill is one of my charities this year. It's holding its first charity golf day on Friday the 7th of October at Cambridge Meridian Golf Club. Lucy has more details if you're interested. Harvest Festival Civic Service. This will take place on Sunday 9th of October at 9:30 a.m. at Great St Mary's Church. Details for this event will be emailed at the beginning of September. I would greatly value the attendance of members at this civic occasion. Presentation of resolution of thanks to Councillor Robert Dryden. Before I call Councillor Dryden, I invited Mr Gerald Floyce to the parlour this afternoon and he's with us this evening. This year marks the 40th year that Mr Floyce is producing the annual resolution of thanks, a job that was originally passed on to him by his mentor, G. Horsley, who was well known as a highly respected tutor in many arts-related subjects at the one-time Cambridge School of Art. She produced the marvellous World War II memorial in the entrance lobby of the Guildhall, having taken over from the person who produced the First World War memorial opposite. Mr Floyce is born and bred in Cambridge and moved down to Ditchling in East Sussex about 20 years ago to establish the Edward Johnston Foundation. Johnston was the so-called father of modern calligraphy and was the designer of the famous bullseye roundel and typeface for the London Underground, which celebrated its centenary this year. This afternoon, Mr Floyce and I spent a very enjoyable afternoon looking at all the old charters in the which are kept currently in the cupboard in the Mayor's parlour. And he certainly showed me some things today on those. Somebody who's lived in Cambridge all of their lives was quite interested to find out. One of which was the thing that we look at here at the top of the coat of arms, which we take to be a castle, is actually a bridge. Because on the original 1575 parchment copy from Queen Elizabeth's first time, you can actually see the water under where the portcullis is now. Just goes to show you never too old to learn new things, and I like a bit of history. Welcome, Mr Floyce. It is my very real pleasure, on behalf of the City Council, to present a framed copy of the Council's resolution of thanks to Councillor Dryden for his mayoralty. Robert, so very ably supported by Sandra, carried out 440 civic engagements, like the office as mayor. This is the last meeting before both Simon Payne and Simon Pugh leave the council. I'm sure members will join me in wishing them both well for the future. I believe councillors would like to say some words. Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you were interviewing for a successor to a post holder you've known over many years, you actually do reflect on the amount of work and the contribution they have made. It's quite a salutary lesson, actually. So recently, some of us had a role of reviewing for the new strategic director role, and it was quite obvious the breadth of expertise required, and Simon Payne has shown that in the years that I've known him. He's certainly shown an expert sort of knowledge of the areas under his responsibility, and it's been a pleasure to work with him. I've been asked to say a few words because often we don't know an awful lot about members of staff until they leave, but it's a shame really. But I've been asked to sort of give a bit of a potted history, and Jeremy likes a bit of history, as you rightly pointed out. I think it's best to show also the public service record Simon has shown over many years, not just here but previously. In 1974, Simon started as a trainee town planning technician with Birmingham City Council in 1974. And he had a major role in urban regeneration within Birmingham. I remember being at school at that time, in a sort of rural part of Northamptonshire that Angela Leadsom represents. Yes. We were always quite impressed with the idea of visiting Birmingham and the Boring. We did go there on a school trip once. Yes, and we thought the Boring was a big issue at the time when you were, I think, about 8 or 9 or 10. But anyway, I don't know if Simon had any role in that, but certainly it's recently demolished and it's been reconstructed, I understand. Anyway, but after many years at Birmingham, Simon went on to Stratford-on-Avon. In 1998, he became the principal planning officer at Stratford-on-Avon. And of course, that's the home of the great British legend that we all know and love, Dion Dublin. I had to Google quite hard to find out other famous names in Stratford-on-Avon, but Dion was the one that came to mind. So it's Michael Ward and Gordon Ramsay, of course, and not forgetting William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare obviously brought us King Lear. Dion is now introducing homes under the hammer, isn't he? But we love him. We love him in Cambridge, and obviously settled there in the last years. Simon came to the City Council in 2005. I don't know who was on the interview panel then, but being serious, I think they made a very good choice. I bet
flexibility and warmth and sort of expertise that you brought to the role. And we see that obviously in the wider legal challenges in the steering of the council, often away from rocky precipices or rocky peninsulas. So you've certainly avoided us a scale of the Costa style ship tragedy that we could have come close to on a number of occasions. You started with us in 1984, but before that you worked from 1979 in the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire, which I enjoyed to visit in 1981 whilst it still existed, and Newport. So to have service here of 32 years, and always to have brought an expertise and thought to it that is pretty unique. I've been associated with quite a number of local authorities, and I've worked with quite a number of lawyers in that time, including parliamentary council at times, and I just think that this city has been so lucky to have someone like you in terms of the guidance that you've been able to give us. So, and it's also been a sort of participation guidance. So, for instance, sometimes members have had choices, and sometimes those have been good or bad choices. So you said what you thought was sometimes the good choice, but you also gone and said, but if you do decide to drive your car over that hill, this is how I suggest you steer it. These are some of the ways you might land it, and these are some of the other consequences that we would have to deal with afterwards. So you've always given that advice in a way which has left members free to make decisions, and that isn't a common feature. And it's been a way of giving us guidance, but then leaving us with decisions, and we honour you for that. We honour you for the service that you've given this council. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to associate myself and my group and our predecessors in this group with the comments of both Councillor Baker and Councillor Hurd. I would like in particular to add some comments about Simon Payne. Councillor Cantor will add some concerning Simon Pugh in a moment. My observation is that these director roles in our organisation are really difficult roles. They require at the best of times plates to be kept spinning with wildly different types and natures at various different speeds and levels of fatality. And that is itself, I think, quite a significant achievement to have kept those dishes and plates spinning over the period that Simon has been with this council, as he's had a portfolio of activities and services that have gone well beyond his original area of expertise, which is, as Kevin Blanco said, is planning, and sometimes has resulted in him having to do more than just sit at an Olympian level, but actually to directly run some of those services as staff have turned over and the organisations have happened. But I think the important thing to understand is overlaid on that, which is kind of business as usual. That's been the case for Simon over a period where we've started to engage in what I think what I suspect our forebears would say was an incredible period of change in the way some of these services of ours are delivered. And my particular recollection is of Simon's contribution working with me on the creation of the first, I think, really significant principal shared service, which was the CCTV service, which was one of considerable complexity and was much different from just a domestic reorganisation in our own council. You face not only the scepticism of some in your own organisation, but also the scepticism of some in another organisation. And you have to build relationships, you have to be prepared to drill deep into data, some of which is quite foreign to you because it's not our own, and you have to have the agility of mind to come up with a new way of achieving something that was already established. It was particularly important, I think, that particular example of shared service, which Simon was the architect of on our side, was a success, because clearly it has been the forerunner of other services that as a council chosen to share with other councils. And Simon has gone on to help with some of those too. So I'm confident that the council couldn't have accomplished and can't accomplish what we have in this huge period of change without a director of Simon's skills. And I learned particularly to appreciate his steadiness, his calm and his patience when confronted with great change, with great complexity or pressure. He has, as others have said, dedicated his career to public service and played it out, much of it at a very senior level, informing, guiding, implementing our decisions. And the council should be very grateful to him indeed. And I'd like to join with those others who've spoken, wishing him all the best for his new lease of perhaps a less structured life, and the hope that his plans for doing some of that in other parts of Europe aren't too disturbed by recent political events. So all the best, Simon.
May I briefly like to add my own expression of thanks to both Simon Payne and Simon Pugh for the long and distinguished service that they have given to this council and to this city. I've observed Simon at work chiefly through my long membership of the planning committee and his, of course, his association with it as the senior officer concerned with planning in the city. And I've always found him to be a model of unruffled efficiency. He's been, if you like, the right hand, which is always there ready to be raised in support of a colleague who needs assistance and support. And when it's required, he's ready with the advice and with the care which is required. And I've observed that tender loving care which he has offered particularly his junior colleagues. Simon Pugh, of him I could also say that I've often had occasion to go to him for advice, sometimes advice concerning council matters that have affected me quite personally, and I've always found him to be understanding, and he's given his judgments with clinical clarity. I'm very thankful for that, and he steered us too through some very, very complex and difficult council agendas, and his expertise, his detailed knowledge of the Constitution has been a great strength to the mayor when I was serving as mayor and all subsequent mayors. I've met both of them in informal situations. I once came across Simon Pugh in the supermarket and found him dressed in leathers, and I thought, there is another side to this man. And to both of them, of course, there is another side behind the professional persona, and they now will have every opportunity to indulge that other side. I wish them well, and I'm sure we all do as they go forward to the next stage of their lives.
Yes, Mayor, I'd just like to add a few words from this side of the chamber in relation to Simon Pugh. Mr. Mayor, Cambridge Dictionary defines a lawyer as being a person whose job it is to guide and assist people in matters relating to the law. And indeed, I think we've heard this evening that that's a role that Simon has performed, and so he's done what exactly it says on the tin, but he's actually done a lot more. And I'm sure everyone in this chamber at some point in time has had the occasion to call Simon, either with a very small, very simple procedural point relating to a meeting like this, or a very meaty, complex legal issue that goes to the heart of this authority. And on the occasions that I've had that need to call him, what I've found is that Simon's always been very consistent, he's always been very open to take the call, and he's provided his time on the same basis as if you've got a stupid procedural question or as if you've got a very meaty, complex legal issue. He's explained the law in a simple way, particularly for me, a layman, not a lawyer, in a way that we can understand. And his advice has always left me with a sense of confidence in that the authority has someone who's there with a rudder, guiding it through these very troubled waters relating to legal issues. And so for an organisation like ours, having a lawyer like Simon has, as the leader mentioned, enabled us to avoid pitfalls, both financial and political. And using the illustration of the leader, which I concur with completely, Simon always gives you a number of options, and we're left as politicians to take those decisions in terms of which option to take. And using the car over the cliff analogy, I think Simon would most probably have said you need to put a parachute in the boot just in case you need it, but whether or not you can get to the boot is another matter. So, and I certainly have found that that type of advice is precisely the type of advice that one needs to have from a lawyer. Giving you options, setting out those options in a way that enables you, the politician, to take that political responsibility, but in a way that gives you confidence. So certainly on a personal level, I'm sure all my colleagues on this side, the other side of the chamber, and also the councillors who are not present tonight, past councillors, really appreciate that approach that Simon has given. And interestingly, I also came across Simon outside this chamber on dark, foggy Friday evenings at Cottenham on five-a-side football, where our sons were playing five-a-side football. And even then, Simon was quite happy to talk about legal issues on the council. So that's an illustration of Simon's commitment. But the true test, I would say, is actually the measure of Simon's contribution to this authority over many years will not really be tested today, but actually in future months and years when he's not here, and we will not have that benefit. So Simon, we wish you all the best, relief from the telephone ringing, and we look forward at least to you having more pleasant discussions on legal issues than perhaps you've had in the past. Many thanks.
I would like to say a few words about both of the gentlemen in question. Simon Payne has always been very helpful to me in the time that I've had to ask questions of him and give me good advice, particularly with regard to the staffing of the licensing side of things. I've had more dealings with Simon Pugh, as you can probably imagine, given that he's a legal person, and I've quite often needed to ask advice from Simon on a number of range of issues because of my experiences, my close experiences on the licensing side of things and other issues as well. I've not always agreed with the advice that Simon Pugh has given me, but I've always understood that it was really good advice, and I've nearly always taken that advice. I certainly will be sorry to see him go, not least because he's the holder of the clock up here, and he's the guy who helps me time the meetings. But I've only been there for a short time, but he's been invaluable help the time I've been here. Thank you, Simon. Moving on, declarations of interest. I would like to ask members to declare now any interest in the items on the agenda before us this evening. Members are reminded that they can declare interest at any time during the meeting if anything occurs to them during the debate tonight. Anybody else? We've got a chance later if you think of anything. Public question time. I understand that the following people wish to address the meeting: Anthony Carbon, Paul Brown, Richard Taylor. Under the scheme allowing members of the public to speak at council meetings, Each speaker must address his or her comments to the chair of the relevant committee or the relevant member of the executive. Each question or statement must be limited to 3 minutes, with a further 2 minutes for a supplementary question or comment on something that has been said. There is normally an overall time limit for public questioning of 30 minutes, including the time taken by responses to questions, but this can be extended at my discretion. I will also point out now, because of complaints I've had from councillors, when the public speakers and the councillors have 30 minutes left in their speaking time, seconds, thank you. See, that's what I like to have in there. 30 seconds left. I will this evening ring the bell. If you continue to speak after your 30 seconds are up, I will interrupt you then. Will Mr. Carter please come forward to ask his question?
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your discretion at allowing this question to go through. Very quick one, and this is public meeting number 6. I think I've filmed and or spoken at in the past couple of days, and it relates to the number of different calendars that we have for Cambridge City Council, South Cambridgeshire District Council, Cambridgeshire County Council and the City Deal. 4 different calendars, making it very, very confusing for not just myself, but a lot of members of the public to keep track of what public meetings are happening and when. And certainly, face-to-face and on social media, people have mentioned to me that they're finding it very, very difficult to find out when and where meetings are. So my just general request is, can the City Council get together with its other councils and just come up with a way of just amalgamating or collating all of the various different meetings that are happening? Because a lot of the decisions that happen now, in particular in relation to the City Deal, are ones where you're actually having to work together as institutions. They're not standalone ones. And actually, as we're seeing, it's having an impact on the turnout as the public become much more interested in what you are doing. So, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Carden. We do, certainly as councils, link up with the other 2 councils and with the City Deal, and we seek to avoid clashes in meetings. So there's certainly an intention to avoid overlap. There is inevitably times when there's more than one meeting at the same time. The 3 main councils, and obviously we can address the City Deal as well. The 3 main councils all have diaries which, in terms of councillors, we can access them through Outlook, and I think that facility may be available to others as well. So the diaries are all published. So each of the 3 has an online diary. But I think whilst in an ideal world it would be good to try and link up, it just at the moment we have to make decisions at times. The City Council about when we have meetings, the County Council and South Cambridge should do the same. And sometimes it just physically isn't possible to integrate, and it isn't really possible to integrate the 3 diaries into one. I think what I can do is have a closer look at the City Deal and the way that we publish the dates of those meetings. I can't speak for fellow councillors, but I don't always regard their non-attendance as being related to whether or not they knew it happened. Physically, I had 5 meetings yesterday, you probably had 5 meetings or similar. It is not possible for all councillors to attend all meetings. Obviously, we encourage people to give a good spread of attendance, particularly on issues that are important.
Someone else supplementary?
Apologies. I mean, in particular, speaking of non-attendance at meetings, just to raise a point of information, the council arranged for a local plan hearing to happen, really in benefit for the homes, the Home Builders Federation, and they, for whatever reason, said it slipped their mind and chose not to turn up at huge expense to all of you and all of us. I think one other thing I'd like to add is in terms of the council's Facebook page, I still think you're missing a huge opportunity there in terms of you're not putting events up there, because a lot of people I'm finding are using Facebook to organise their calendars, and also just screenshots from some of the council papers that you have. The crime statistics, for example, incredibly useful, but they're buried somewhere. So what I've started doing is taking screenshots just to share them. And again, it's something I'll just continue to push the council on as a means of helping you improve all things digital. So I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Well, just briefly, I think we welcome the fact, and I mean, people who film us, people who blog about us, help promote, help share the fact that the public, as I say, in these meetings are in the right to attend. So we put a lot of information on Twitter and in other ways onto social media. So all of this meeting, the City Deal meetings are sort of on Twitter, but there is perhaps a way of doing better. So we welcome the fact that you publicise them, and obviously the level of attendance at a number of meetings has been very impressive.
Can I call on Mr. Brown to ask this question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me here to speak. My question is to the council to request that they organise a town hall style public meeting to allow residents in Cambridge to discuss the implications of the EU referendum results with MPs, MEPs, councillors and other politicians. I think we all know that there's a huge amount of concern in the local community and beyond about the impact that the referendum might have, both social and economic. And I think people need to have an opportunity to ask some questions and maybe resolve some of those uncertainties. And I think there's a couple of issues which are particularly urgent. One is the huge uncertainty regarding the position of EU citizens from other countries in the UK at the moment, and that's not just very worrying for the individuals concerned and their families, but also for a lot of the businesses and other organisations that employ them. And I think we need to remember that these EU citizens did not have the right to vote in this referendum, even though the people most directly implicated by the results, and that there is a danger that they will be used as bargaining chips in the coming negotiations. So I think, given also the increase in racist attacks and the degree to which has given licence, the fact that you hear people say things like pack your bags, we'll be on your way soon, etc. The government needs to send out a very clear signal that these EU citizens are welcome and that we will not tolerate racism, and the best way to do that would be to recognise their status of these EU citizens and give them the right to remain immediately. The other question is concerning the great uncertainty concerning the ability of UK citizens to take part in EU academic and research programmes. There's already been evidence from Scientists for EU and other groups who have seen that the UK researchers have been essentially frozen out of grant applications to take part in European collaborations. This isn't just about money. Although there is a question over whether there will be sufficient research funding made available to cover the loss of EU funding, it's also the case that one of the great advantages of boons for UK research has been the ability to take part in and even lead research collaborations in the EU. And there's a danger that great scientists will leave the UK if they cannot continue to do so. So this is another issue which must be addressed and must be satisfactorily as soon as possible. I think for these reasons and many others, it is important to have a public meeting in Cambridge where the citizens can actually discuss these issues with their elected representatives and other politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your question. I don't disagree with the word that you said. The referendum that occurred on the 23rd of June will have long-term impacts as well as you've raised short-term ones. I won't go into the whole of the issue. We're going to be debating the issue particularly on EU citizens and their rights, and also the issue of hate crime later in the meeting. The council helped some 2,000 people have written to Dan Zyklin as our MP, either by email or letter. We have to take account of the fact that there are people in the city that didn't feel that the EU or that was the right decision. And I think we also have to take account of the reality of who's running the country and how best to work with them. In terms of the substance, I've spent much of my time since the referendum working with other organisations in the city, working with both MPs, several meetings, a particular urgent focus on the issue you raised, because 9,000 of our residents, our people, effectively made a contract with this country when they agreed to come and live here. Many of them of whom are also married or relative other EU citizens here or to UK citizens, and they made their home here. So the conclusion is that I agree with your request. It has already been requested also by Daniel Zyklin as our MP, and whilst other people have talked to me about, well, can we organise another march, I think an indoor rational discussion is the right route. So we looked at the availability of the small hall in this building. I don't know how we organise an event in terms of making sure it's balanced. I would personally propose and seek a well-chaired event which has some balanced contributions and is actually looking to the future. I appreciate that there's a huge amount of despair among some people, but we have to focus on, well, what is it that we need to do? And that, as you said, the most immediate issue is the position of 9,000 Cambridge citizens. So I give you commitment that we will investigate organising a meeting in the Guildhall, and that we will be open. Obviously, it's a question of how many people want to come, but we will organise it in a large venue, and we will invite people to come along. Thank you.
Just thank you. Yes, I just wondering, I forgot to mention timescale. I think really given the very fast pace of things that are going on in the country here and in Cambridge, if it could be arranged within the next month, I think that would be very useful.
Well, we've investigated dates, basically we would be looking at a date between, I think, the 25th of July and the 5th of August.
Thank you.
Mr Taylor, will you ask your question?
Thank you. I'm Richard Taylor. I'm a resident of Cambridge. I'd like to address my comments to the Chair of the Civic Affairs Committee, though really what I want to do is just speak to councillors before you take a decision later on about your allowances. I'd like to urge you all to vote not to increase the amount of money that you personally take home. When I pay my taxes, what I expect you to be doing with that money is providing public services, emptying the bins, helping people to find an appropriate home in the city. Now, I think everybody in the city will understand really clearly what the decision before you today is. It's a question of our money's been entrusted to you, and some councillors are proposing that you take more of it home personally. So for that reason, because it's such a simple and clear decision to make, I suggest that you have a recorded vote so that we can all see how you've decided to spend the money. Because I think that this decision really lets people find out your attitudes to public money, what you think of public money, and what respect you have for public money if you were to decide to take it home for yourselves. I think that shows a lack of respect for public money. On transparency, I'd like you to be as open as you can be about all the money that you take home and your perks, including, for example, parking and IT equipment, which information on that isn't proactively published as your allowances and expenses are. I know the justification for the increase is that some of you consider that being a councillor is a job. I don't think being a councillor is a job, and I don't think it's appropriate to ask us to pay you as if it was a job. I think that the thing you should be doing is you should be setting strategy, setting strategic direction for the council, scrutinising and taking decisions. You shouldn't be working in the council and asking for us to pay you as if you were working within the council. The last point I'd like to make is that we don't have the money for you to take home and spend personally. We are borrowing to support public spending in this country at the moment. The council gets grants from central government. There is no money for you to be taking home. We have to borrow. If you decide today to award yourselves more money, we have to borrow to provide you with that money. And I think that's another reason it's completely inappropriate for you to increase of answers.
Is there a question?
No, it's just a statement.
If there's not a question, there can't be an answer.
I'm happy with that.
As a statement.
Would you like to be invited to the statement?
No, it's going to be debated later on the January.
Like that, then we'll move on to item 3, recommendations of the executive for adoption. We now turn to agenda item 3A, the recommendation of the Executive Council for Housing. The recommendation is set out on page 9 of the agenda. Is there any debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and be brief because I know this isn't the most exciting report that comes before the chamber, but I think it is important. I think that we all believe that housing is an important subject, and therefore understanding how the HRO project stands from time to time is a useful thing to do. But this is a little snapshot, so I think it is worth looking at what this tells us. The recommendation is simply to really carry forwards, and of course we're going to be doing that in the committee, but the report does illustrate a couple of points that I think it's worth everybody just focusing on. Of course, the HRA is hugely distorted by the progress or lack of progress or the issues around the new build programme. And that's what we see here. You'll see that there has been a slight overspend in the new build programme, which is quite interesting because we know that we cannot build our own fast enough. This isn't a criticism, this is just an observation. If you look at the detail behind that overspend, you'll see that where people are building things for us, they're building it faster than we anticipated. When we're building it for ourselves, we seem to be a bit behind. So there's a question there for us. Are we good at programming? Have our officers got the resources they need to stay on budget? So I think this is a good point for the Executive Council to take away. And I'll look at him if he's not already looking at it closely. Digital in place clearly is a big issue in the context of programming here. I think we all recognise it's a complicated piece of work that needs to be done. But it comes back to this programming point. There are so many moving parts. It shows how difficult it is to manage the budget. There is a big underspend, as you'll see, in plan maintenance. I think this is because it's a change in the way plan maintenance is done. But I think members will see that not all of that big underspend is being carried forward, which means that there is a lower amount of spend in plan maintenance. I think we all ought to recognise that it's important that the estate that we have, or little estate that we have left, is probably maintained. So again, that's a good point, again, for us all to scrutinise, and scrutiny is important. And then finally, you'll see that in the report, one of the paragraphs references that we are backing up now with our right to buy proceeds, and there's a ticking clock on that, because we have to give it back if we don't spend it fast enough. And you'll see that the options that we have, are to give it back, so it's expensive to keep, it's also expensive to spend, because the option is to buy new properties in the open market. And we don't want to do that. I think we really need to find a way to spend that money. We don't know whether the division money is going to come through, so we've got to find a way. These are just observations, this is not a criticism of Ops, this is not a criticism, this is simply saying, this is what this report tells us.
Councillor Price, you get the mic to reply if there's any other debate. I'll just ask any other speakers. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we're all pretty much aware of everything that you've said. I'm not disagreeing with anything you've said. I do think that the officers do have pretty much everything they need. The officers are, as you know, working very hard. You said that Ditchburn Place is a very complicated area. unanimously, so I would recommend this to the council. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now go to the vote. Please, can I see all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. And those against? We now turn to agenda item 3B, the recommendation of the Executive Council for Finance and Resources. The recommendations are set out on page 25 of the agenda. Is there any debate? Councillor Cantrell.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment in relation to the recommendation which is set out on page 15 of the supplementary package. And I'd just like to give a few comments as to the reason why I'm proposing an amendment. During the item coming to strategy and resources, Mr. Mayor, I expressed concerns regarding certain elements of the capital plan that we were considering, in particular in relation to elements relating to the EIP projects, the 20 miles an hour project, and for example the cycleway project. And whilst we recognise on this side of the chamber the capital plan is a meaty animal, and there are large chunks of cash that can get spent one day after the end of a financial year, and so therefore the capital plan looks material in terms of slippage, but in reality that cash is then spent immediately after the end of the financial year. We recognise that. But in relation to these projects, Mr. Mayor, I have a concern that this authority is not delivering. And it's not delivering for residents of the city. And these are projects which may be small in nature, may not be material in the overall scheme of things, but in your wards, for your residents, these are important projects, and they expect us to deliver. And so, Mr. Mayor, the fact that we now look at a position where the EIP projects are £500,000 behind in total at the outturn gives me a cause for concern. And then one has to overlay on top of that, Mr. Mayor, is that what we heard in Civic Affairs in relation to internal audit. Internal audit were undertaking a report in this area of the authority, still draft in nature, but haven't been able to actually sign off on that report. Now, officers in this area are working with internal audit to work through some of the issues, but I think it is an illustration where this authority needs to have a look at what's actually going on. And so therefore, Mr. Mayor, what I'm proposing is a special report, a specific report, comes to the next Strategy and Resources Committee in relation to this area of the capital plan. Because we have to remember, Mr. Mayor, that the context of this, and I appreciate the current Executive Councillor is new to this portfolio, and so his approach may be a different approach, but his predecessor, the infamous Councillor Owens, his argument was, and we heard it, I went back actually, and the benefit of video of the opinion formers, Mr. Taylor, for example, is that you can actually go back and hear Councillor Owens on a number of occasions, and he quoted as saying, in relation to the capital plan, he was going to promise less and deliver more. And not only that, Mr. Mayor, if you recall, we paused the EIP budget for a full year in order to do that catch-up. Now, the current Executive Councillor in Strategy and Resources indicates that we're cautiously ambitious in relation to the capital plan and these projects. What I would argue, Mr. Mayor, is that actually we're neither. We're promising less and we're actually delivering even less. And so I hope members will support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second vote? Do you wish to speak now? Any other debate? Councillor Howard?
I didn't hear, and I apologise for that, I was talking to the public speaker, but I have seen the amendment. We inherited what we think is a good scrutiny system. That scrutiny system relies on committees. That scrutiny system also relies on sharing of proposals before a discussion. These are a series of amendments that have been sprung on the council, which could have been brought to a scrutiny committee. You can nod your head, Councillor Cantrill, but these issues have not been properly raised at scrutiny.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. This was raised at Strategy and Resources. I know the leader left early because he had another engagement, and I appreciate that, but I actually did raise both of these items at Strategy and Resources in relation to these issues.
Okay.
I did actually raise it.
Then you're asking for a review of capital, Councillor Cantrill, and you can do that within Strategy and Resources. You do not have to bring a resolution to council. Every member of this council, and it's good to remind people, we have the right to ask for a focus, ask for a report, right? So I accept that there is a right to bring items to this chamber, but by bringing them without any notice at all that you're going to bring an amendment, and by putting the focus on the council, and I accept that there was some discussion that night, it's just not the way to do it. So yes, there can be a debate about scrutiny, and I'm sure that the Executive Council for Finance and Resources will bring this forward. But we raised last October the fact that if you bounce in, and that was on, and I remember going back to the previous October, you bounced into this chamber a whole bunch of changes where you were actually trying to stop Cambridge Live being set up in this chamber on issues that you haven't raised in committee. And I will come back on the other amendment that follows this to the next one. You certainly didn't raise that one. So you cannot have proper scrutiny by trying to do it in this council chamber. I'm sorry.
Councillor, you get the right to reply at the end of the debate, or if you wish to speak now, bearing in mind that Councillor Pitt has not yet made his contribution to second the motion, you may wish to hold that.
It's legally just slightly there, Mr. Mayor, isn't it?
I try to be helpful. Any other debate?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to second this amendment. I don't think there's anything procedurally wrong with this amendment. That does follow some exchanges at Strategy Resources on exactly this matter. And the question is not a complicated one, to be frankly clear. We are looking at an area where we simply as a council are not getting something right. We seem to have a particular problem in delivering physically engineered projects. There's a lot of the capital programme which is about giving money to other people to spend, in the form of grants or making property investments and such like. But the particular area where we seem to have a problem is this area of physical capital projects which are supposed to be engineered by our own staff in-house. And this is not a new problem, it's a problem that existed 18 months ago and drove the administration to say that we're going to fix this problem, we're going to fix it, we're going to do two things. We're going to have a restructure of the group that is responsible for them, we're going to do that, and also we're going to have a holiday from all new schemes and the Environmental Improvement Programme. And that was itself a disappointment to a lot of members, and was the public who come to us looking for those schemes. But we thought, fine, okay, if that's going to fix the problem, then maybe that's worthwhile. But we've had that holiday now. There's been a catch-up period for the backlog, a whole 12 months. There's been a restructure, but we're still looking at an enormous backlog. So there is something still that is seriously wrong if we can't get this right. It's been said that, oh, well, it's because there are lots of little small projects that it's very fiddly for people to do. And I accept that many of the projects are of a small nature, but I think members all around this chamber will acknowledge that these projects, small though they are just the things that do satisfy many, many residents. The small, the low-value projects, carefully deliver enormous satisfaction to many residents. So I think that this amendment is asking for a very sensible thing. It's asking for a little bit deeper review of what is going on and a simple response, and yes would be a great answer.
Councillor Robertson?
Thank you. There was discussion at the Strategy and Resources Committee about this item, but as I said then at the time, we are ambitious about providing various capital schemes in the city, and sometimes we have not been able to catch up with all those works. We did have had a holiday at a time when we put schemes, we wouldn't accept new schemes. We've also introduced a new system so that schemes don't get to be considered until they've been properly looked into and costed. So we are addressing the issue, and we will continue to do so. But it is a pity that we didn't actually raise this issue further out the strategy and resources itself. I think that we will not accept this proposal to add further work on the council officers. What we need them to do is get on with doing the work rather than actually producing reports. And that's what we will do.
Thank you. We now need to vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. And those against?
27.
And now we move straight to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show.
27.
And those against? We now turn to agenda item 3C, the recommendation of the Executive Council for Financial Resources. The recommendation is set out on page 67 of the agenda. Is there any debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an amendment which I was just trying to find the relevant page actually. I think it's page 17. And just for clarity again, because again there seems to be some miscommunication in terms of what actually happened in strategy and resources. So in strategy and resources, there was a debate in relation to this item. I asked for a specific report. The officers basically said that it would come as part of a mid-term report in September, and the Executive Council agreed with the officers. The reason why I bring it again today in the Council is because the world has changed. The world has changed in the last 24 hours, let alone in the last week, since we had this meeting. And so I think it's very important that we as an authority get advice from our officers in terms of what our position is financially and what approach they will take in this very uncertain world. And let me give you an illustration as to why that is important. We talk about the investment that we've made in terms of the financial unit in this council commercial property or council property fund. What we have seen in the market, people will have read in the newspapers, is that a lot of the funds, commercial and residential property funds, third-party funds, have stopped redemptions because of the volatility. Now, I don't know whether or not our fund, in which we've invested, has similar issues or not. I'd be grateful if the Executive Council can give me some context on that, but I think it's important that we, members of the city, know what the consequences are of the financial volatility on our investments, A, and more importantly, that actually residents in the city have confidence that we know what's going on. And at a time when there is a lot of uncertainty, people are very concerned about the financial position of institutions like ours. So I think it is important that this amendment is considered. I do hope that members support the amendment. It's a pretty factual request. There's no political game sought. I think it's important for this authority.
Is there a second vote? You should speak now. Any further debate?
happened after the referendum, and so there was knowledge then that there is volatility. There is a mid-year financial review, and that happens each year, and the thoroughness that we get in that mid-year financial review is that all of the risks are analysed, and clearly there are issues, and particularly, I'm no more expert on some of these things Councillor might be able to claim, but we are in a huge period of volatility. Mr Mayor, the currency has gone down 10% plus, it's bounced up a bit today, we don't know what's happening, we didn't think it was a good idea at the time anyway. But by September, when we are preparing reports, if the mid-year review, financial review comes to committee in October, that will address it. So I appreciate, if I had a list of the times that Councillor Campbell over the last 2 years have called for a special report, that would be a long list. And I've heard it at Civic Affairs about not changing delegations unless there's a further report, making sure we have reports before we do things. And I think we have a system in place. So I know Councillor Robertson will probably add to it, but again, there isn't not a need for a separate report.
Any other debate? Councillor Beck.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Herbert's previous contribution was saying that it was open to opposition councillors to request a report whenever we like, and so it's rather strange that his contribution just now he was bemoaning the fact that people were asking for too many special reports. This is an important matter for the public, it's a matter of public interest, and sometimes I'm thinking that Councillor Herbert would prefer it if we conducted the full council meeting without any business to transact at all. We just can make speeches about senior people and staff who are leaving, vote in silence and go home early. I mean, it may suit. I think I got the answer there. But actually we're here to transact business if they aren't. And it's very disappointing that they are trying to curtail that. These are matters of important public debate, and it's exactly the sort of thing, the priorities for your group, for our group, the independents. This is the forum where they can bring these things up and can draw public attention to them, and I think it's completely legitimate and greatly disappointing that he's trying to curtail that.
I don't understand. Councillor Saris? Thank you. As a chair of the committee, again, I do regret that this point wasn't argued more fully at the committee itself. And let's for a moment take this amendment seriously. It says that the impact of the decision to leave the European Union has been economic and financial uncertainty. So if we actually ask for a report for the impact of the decision on our economy, what would the conclusion be? That the impact is uncertain. What's the point of that? It's purely political posturing. Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I should explain interest in this, but I spent most of the last 3 weeks dealing with the financing in the commercial property sector, and I can tell you that I know more about it now than I did when I started, and I think we all, given we have a significant amount of money invested in the sector, we all need to become a bit more expert in it. The redemptions or the failure of the removal of the right to redeem house property funds is something that's happened since this committee. This is relevant to the largest property funds in this country. This is sure as hell going to become relevant to the fund we have on. We really do need to find out in detail, and I'm sure we can find out. We need to disclose, I think, a bit wider amongst ourselves what this means, because remember that the rates that we get on this fund are pretty good. It says here it's 4.5%, and that rate, the interest rate that we assume, feeds into our budgeting process. And if you remember, if we go back and look at the exhibits video, we'll catch Councillor Owens admitting even last year when we set the budget that he didn't believe the interest rates that were in our budget, that he thought they were too high, projections on interest rates. Well, they're sure as hell too high now. And I think that we mustn't waste any time in trying to identify
the same role in the 80s when we were investing in property then, and we're benefiting from those properties now. But the investments we've made recently in property and in property funds must be seen as long-term investments. And to try and guess what's going to happen in the next few months is not the answer. It's to have a strategy for a long-term position for the benefit of the people of Cambridge and to ensure that the economic progress of the city is developed. So, as for the request for a special report, well, as my colleague Leader has said, there will be a report in September anyway, and we will make sure that the issue, to some extent, is covered by that. But really, it's the long term that really we must be looking at. We're not worrying about. It's not personal finances we're dealing with here. We've got to think about where we are in our career and our life. This is long term for the city. It's not an issue that you can worry about in the short term. You have to think long term about it. So we will deal with it in the autumn in the normal report.
We now move to vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. And those against?
27.
And now we move straight on to the vote on the minute. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show.
27.
And those against? Thank you. We now move to agenda item 4, recommendations of committees for adoption. We now turn to agenda item 4A, the recommendation of Employment Senior Officer Committee, monitoring officer arrangements. The recommendation is on page 87 of the agenda. Is there any debate? There is no debate. We'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous.
We now turn to agenda item 4B, the recommendation of Civic Affairs Committee Assurance Framework. The recommendation is on page 91 of the agenda. Is there any debate? If there is no debate, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Please show.
Unanimous.
Good. We now turn to agenda item 4C, the recommendation of Civic Affairs Committee review of members' allowances. The recommendations are on page 132 and 133 of the agenda. Is there any debate? I thought I was doing too well. Councillor Kenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The issue of men's allowances is something which we periodically, as an authority, look at. The context of this amendment, Mr. Mayor, in relation to a discussion that happened at Civic Affairs and the independent experts' report around members' allowances, is that one has to remember we as an authority, as a council, chose not to change the members' allowances post the financial crisis. And we did that in part, Mr. Mayor. I think, to be fair, it was the unity of the whole chamber in terms of that approach, because we recognised at that point that our employees were also taking pain, material pain, and as we've seen over the last 7 or so years, the public sector workers have bared the brunt of the austerity measures that were put in place. So we now come to this point where we're reviewing members' allowances again. And as I mentioned in Civic Affairs, we have this conundrum. We have this conundrum in a sense that people we want to be councillors, to be representatives of our community, be them regardless of age, regardless of sex, regardless of background, or wealth, it's a very important point, need to basically be able to think that they can be elected as councillors and are able to perform that role without compromising minimising the requirement to actually go and earn a living. And actually what I see in this authority over the last 10 or so years that I've been a councillor is actually there's a narrowing of that profile. It's a narrowing to people who tend to be retired, have more time, have a pension and so forth, and have the flexibility to be able to perform the role of councillor. And whilst those people are very honourable people, Mr. Mayor, and there are many in this chamber, we're not doing the city a service in terms of siloing that type of person as a councillor. We should be drawing from as broad a population of people as possible. So the principle of raising the members' allowance is one that I think we should look at. And then it comes to the amount. And here, I have to say, Mr. Mayor, you know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what that amount should be. And if we took one level, I illustrated it in S&I. If you look at the increase of the base grade of employee within the authority, ignoring the improvement for the living wage, the increase in salary, ignoring spinal progression, was about 4.9% over the same period where we have not taken any change in members' allowance. If you look at the improvement in salary as a result of the consolidation we did by introducing the living wage, and so we did away with a number of tiers of grade, that increase is approximately 14%. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that when we take this decision, we have to think about where we sit on the opposite side of the table to the employees of this authority, be they people who collect rubbish, be they people who are out there, city rangers and so forth. And we also have to bear in mind, Mr. Mayor, that we have to face the public. And the logic of the increase has to be credible with the public. And for that reason, Mr. Mayor, I think that this percentage increase is the increase that this authority should consider. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? You wish to speak now? Councillor Kenmore.
Thank you. I think the points have been made. It's basically about the importance of allowing poorer people to become members of this council. Thank you.
Councillor Hipkin.
What should councillors be paid? Well, let's go through the options. One is that they should be paid money, and it should be entirely a matter of voluntary service. If that were to happen, the consequence inevitably would be that councillors would be stuck even more than they are at the moment with the retired and the wealthy. Councillors simply would not mirror to any degree the range of citizens within a society. The second option, again theoretical, is to pay them a professional salary commensurate with their responsibilities. When you consider the size of this organisation, the size of its budget, the huge sums of money that we authorise to be spent, saved, invested, when you consider the importance of the planning decisions, the licensing decisions that this council makes, and the kind of expertise and care that councillors exercising those functions have to demonstrate every time they act on behalf of the public interest. I hope Councillor Herbert will not be embarrassed if I mention not him personally, but as a leader of this council. He has, over the last several months, been fully engaged with speaking with government ministers, with top civil servants, about the devolution deal, the city deal, and a number of other important matters of that kind. And he is responsible politically for a council in a city which is the fastest growing city in the United Kingdom. And for that, he picks up something equivalent to a shopkeeper's income, if that. Now, let's say that neither of those options, the salaried professional on the one side and the purely voluntary on the other, neither of those can be defended. Because of the public service ethic that all of us are signed up to. We're not in this business for what we can get out of it. We want to do a decent job, but we want the job that we are doing to be done by as wide a range of citizens as it is possible to attract. And frankly, the question of income, of payment, does matter to a good many of our citizens when they might consider whether to serve on the council or not. And I hope that councillors this evening, when they come to vote, will ask themselves the question, how important are these allowances in my own financial circumstances? If they're simply pin money which they can almost do without, then perhaps they should consider very carefully whether they shouldn't, this evening, abstain when it comes to the vote.
Councillor Ryan?
Very briefly, the reason I want to support this, because over the years we've had independent panels give us guidance on what we should accept. I think if you have these panels coming, independent panels, then we're ignore them. So I think we should go along with what the panel advice is doing.
Any further debate? Councillor Smart?
So one thing that hasn't been said is money is a medium of exchange, and if we all agree that allowances need to be paid to councillors to do this work, then we have to accept that that figure needs to change with time because of inflation. Inflation is very low at the moment, but so there's inflation. So I'm saying it's more for the public really, because it's been filled rather than councils in committee, because I know that they all understand this, but the fact is that it is a sensitive subject. We're talking about our own allowances. However, in order to think about future councillors when we all have in the job and then be councillors, we need to put in place a system that will recognize them for the time and effort and convenience and such like of doing this work. And also it's very important as well, but it does involve a lot of time out of the family and so on to do it all. And so it's important that allowances recompense for that. And I think one important part of what the panel has done here, although I'm not in favour of everything the panel has said, but certainly one aspect of it, is it sets up a system whereby the allowances will go up year on year with the increases in the national minimum wage, which I think is a good thing because then it sets a protocol in place whereby allowances will rise for future councillors in line with inflation.
Councillor Robertson first. Councillor Herbert, I'm still holding you. Councillor Vick.
I think first we must thank the independent panel for their work. They've spent a lot of time digging into the facts and finding out what they could from us and from other sources. And what they've come up with is an interesting report. It's worth reading in more detail. There's a section in the beginning that says Cambridge is a dynamic, rapidly growing city with a national elements of what the decisions we're making in Cambridge do have a higher level of importance than many of these other councils. If you look at the level of investment that we've got in Cambridge, our level of investment in property is far higher than we've got any of the other district councils. Our volume of work we can get through each year is relatively high. It doesn't possibly compare with some of the unitary authorities, but they're in a different league, and county councils as well. So I think we have to reflect on the fact that we do need to pay a reasonable amount. Again, I'll quote from the independent panel's report. Being a city council is a voluntary activity for which an allowance is paid in order to ensure that diversity is encouraged and no one is debarred from taking an active part in the democratic process. Well, I think they've come up with a figure which they justified to themselves and they want us to accept. I think we should accept that. We're coming from a very low base. We've always come at a low base. It's not just the last review that was low. It was low to start with. I think we have to be realistic and compare ourselves with the other councils in the area, in the region, and in other councils in similar authorities around the country, Oxford in particular, and recognise that we should be paying a reasonable amount of money for people to be able to take part in our democratic process and be able to act as councillors of the city council. So I would urge you to reject the amendment and to approve the original proposal.
Councillor. I've got Councillor Herbert still showing to speak. I've got Councillor Big waiting to second the amendment.
Point of order, what's going on?
Councillor what's going on is I had Councillor Herbert who showed wanted to speak, and I was holding Councillor Big for seconding the amendment at his discretion. And I was just getting a bit of agreement across the floor that you were quite happy to take it in that order. That was all. Councillor Big.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that there is no difference, as Councillor Robertson said, on the principle involved in this issue. That we all know that the reason why the council desisted from increasing the allowances since 2008, why it took that decision then, and why it continued with that decision for those years afterwards. I think we all agree that this is at the right time to review that approach and to hook ourselves back into the same sort of environment that the rest of the world is and has been experiencing over that time. And so that probably does involve more than an annual increase when we start picking up the threads again. The independent remuneration panel can help us with data gathering and analysis, but I think we feel that it's also necessary to apply some judgment on that result when it comes to considering it as elected members. And we're saying on this side that we think that it is an important alignment that we have with the staff of the organisation we're councillors of. And for us to take an increase representing the period since 2008, which would go dramatically ahead of the increases that those staff have had in their salaries, would be something that we would not want to do. I think that we have some need for respect to the difficulties that staff have gone through over this period, and the fact that there have been minimal increases in public sector pay, and as councillors we are part of that public sector. And because we have the ability uniquely to vote for our own increases, we would like to make sure that the increase that experience periods of no increase and then have a sudden catching up, which is what we're talking about now. But I think that's justified, and I think it's simply a difference in judgment about what could or should be justified, and hence the amendment that we have proposed, which is, after all, by many people's standards, a very significant percentage increase all the same.
Councillor Herbert?
Well, I just wanted to hear the context of the different number, because I contend that the opportunity was at civic affairs as well as here. I mean, we're perfectly happy to debate issues here. I've been a councillor for 12 years. I'm better off than other people, but I know a lot of people have to think about it, and I do know people that are not stood for this council. And they are not people like me. They're people that could not afford, because everybody in this council chamber in different ways has to make compromises with their employer. Most employers do not give unpaid leave. Sorry, they don't give paid leave. A number of employers don't give unpaid leave either. So I'm not here to argue for myself. I asked for the document to be shared, which is the summary of the 52 councils. And of the 52 councils in the East, we've been bossed for year after year after year out of 52. And so this isn't a comparison council bid in 2008. It's a longer comparison. I've been a council since 2004. There's been one change in 12 years. So I take it seriously. We are voting on something that affects us ourselves, but I think we're actually, I don't know how I'll be a councillor, but I'm more thinking about the councillors that are coming. I'm not thinking specifically there. And after this, I did a recalculation, and my friend, Councillor Robertson, is normally spot on, and I probably gave him this figure because I didn't look at the table right, but we moved from 52nd to 42nd, and that is not moving up way out. And if you actually look at what councils judge, to be fair, other councils right across the region judge it to be different. We have also, on this side, decided that to accept the recommendation of the panel that we should forego vice chair allowances. So there are a number of people sitting on this side that won't be really any better off. And that doesn't apply to your side partly, because we just happen to believe in taking the vice chairs of committees. So it's not an easy decision, but the panel has come up with a rationale. And the panel has also, if you look at other councils, there are, I think, 10 or 15 wise councils around the region that have got a low base index whereby they just then index it. So this is a low base index from here on. There is no proposal from the panel or from this side to do this, other than to recognise that over a period since 2005, there has been no increase.
Thank you. The right to require debate stands with the Councillor First as Chair of the Civil Affairs Committee, but just before we get to that, I just want to fill all councillors in the way I intend to chair the council meeting. Where a councillor has reserved their right to reply, either a motion or an amendment, I will hold that councillor to come into the debate at any time they indicate to speak. I will give those councillors from any side of the council chamber the right to hold right back to the end of the debate, so that they can have a chance to almost as a right to reply to the debate to their amendment. And when we get to the motions, the amendment or the motion, which, as we know, we debate as much as one. But councillors should remember that if they are speaking as a seconder to a motion, the debate can still go on after they've spoken. It's not a right to reply that is given to executive councillors. But I thought I'll point that out so we all know how I'm dealing with the meeting. With that, I now offer the right to reply to the Chair of Civic Affairs, Councillor First.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't really got anything much to add to this, except I do understand the trepidation amongst members
favour, please show.
27.
And those against? Thank you. We now move to agenda item 5, all questions. This item will last for a maximum of 30 minutes. The Executive Councillor, Chair or nominee will have up to 2 minutes to reply. The questioner will have 2 minutes for the supplementary question or to seek clarification of the response to the original question. The Executive Councillor, Chair or nominee will have a further 2 minutes to reply to the supplementary question. At the conclusion of the 30 minutes, those that have not answered may provide a written response to the member who put the question. Councillor Leighton has the first question. Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Just trying to find my notes. Right, when we took over control of the council, we found there was lots of money sitting in bank accounts, only very little, maybe 0.5% here or 1% there. Over 20 million pounds in reserves were just sitting there without actually earning anything really substantial for the council. In fact, they were losing value because they were earning less than inflation. So we've invested money in property, and the particular question is about the Haverhill Business Park, where we are receiving a rent of over £450,000 per year, which is equivalent to a return of 6.1% on that cost of buying it. So there's a really good example of where we have turned around the fortunes of the council and the residents of the city by actually making our assets work, pay their way. And that's the way we intend to continue.
Supplementary?
Can I congratulate the Executive Council and his predecessor for actually investing the money in that way?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Was that a question?
Yes, it was.
More so than many councillors.
The meter's running on this 30 minutes, so I should keep it quiet between you. Councillor Austin.
Question 2. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that this has been slightly overtaken by events, but I will answer it in the spirit I think it was addressed. Unfortunately, a period of heavy rain during the dismantling of the infrastructure after the beer festival resulted in localised damage to Jesus Green. Pretty localised damage. This period of wet weather then continued on a regular basis throughout June, which nationally has been recorded, I think, as the wettest ever since records began. These unprecedented weather conditions have hampered the rectification works, so officers were ready to undertake work, reseeding, arrange the delivery of materials to the site, soil and everything else, but it was just simply too wet to do the reseeding, and that actually delayed it quite a bit. We didn't get the chance to work the damaged area with the machinery that was required until the 8th of July, Thursday the 8th of July. The affected area was demarcated with orange fencing to deter access, dismantling, and it's all volunteer work for the most part. One of the problems we've got is, of course, the dismantling of the beer festival itself and full dismantling the roadway. And you can't load up the roadway without having heavy lorries there to put the roadway on. So ultimately, it's impossible to completely keep heavy lorries on that grass. Most cities this size have a central square that isn't used for a 7-day market. So there's hard standing that you can put events of this nature, you know, and if you're aware that you're likely to have a wet summer, then that's something that you might go for. We don't have that option. Most cities also use public parks in the way that we do. We don't have the option of using a tarmac civic space, and although I am possessed of several useful superpowers, I can't change the weather, and I can't make wet, muddy grass behave like tarmac. Well, it means we have limited options. So we'll either stop running events or allowing events like the beer festival. The beer festival, as you know, is run by volunteers. Or we acknowledge and accept that actually having heavy machinery set up and pulled down means that sometimes there is going to be damage to the grass. That is the price that we pay for having events on public open spaces in wet weather. The grass grows back, as my colleagues are repeating, and this seems to me to be a reasonable price to pay, given that it's not the council that's paying. So if the opposition is suggesting we should ban events like the beer festival, the big weekend, I wish they'd be honest about it and come out and say that. Otherwise, please accept rain happens, grass goes back, and a Labour council is going to continue to stage public events in public spaces for all of our residents, regardless of the weather.
Councillor Barnett.
Question for you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council will be aware, since April of last year, the management and delivery of the Folk Festival rests now with King Clive, and the City Council doesn't have an operational role to play anymore. However, I'm pleased to inform Council, following the run-up of King Clive, plans for the events are progressing as expected, and tickets are expected to sell out very soon. I'm also pleased to say that the festival is maintaining its renowned reputation for providing a very high level of artistic, ethical and green standards, and has received very good press coverage. Cambridge Light have continued to work established the Greener Festival Awards, and Folk Festival is now a Greener Festival Associate, reflecting its long track record in this area. It's now also working with Attitude is Everything, which is an organisation committed to improving deaf and disabled people's access to live music. Within the programme itself, the festival's commitment to justice, fairness and tolerance are clearly visible. For more information on the lineup, I recommend visiting the Folk Festival pages on the King Clive website, which have a full listing.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Kendra.
Number 4 to the leader.
It was a matter of some distress that when I arrived at Borrells Ward yesterday evening at 10:30, there was no one there to greet. There wasn't Councillor Cantrell, although he cried out earlier in the day, to be fair to him. There wasn't Balfour Beatty, there wasn't anybody. I stopped an Australian who was smoking. I didn't know he was Australian, but I discovered that after. Something to do with the lighting. And I had a second occasion, I will now be more serious. I had a second occasion this week to have a look at the lighting. And I had a look at it on Monday in the daytime, I had a look at it on Wednesday. And I'm fully up to having another look at it next week. I think there's been some misunderstandings. My commitment was to look at the lighting quality and to see that that was consistent with the lighting which, as Councillor Cantrell will know, is not particularly even along the whole of Queen's Road and the back to that whole area. And also that the lighting was effectively around the University Library and particularly at the area of College Corner was satisfactory. Sadly, one light was out last night, and obviously that was perhaps the matter why there was a late attempt by the county council to cancel our engagement whilst I was in the middle of 3 meetings and therefore didn't see there was an email until today. But I will continue to take an interest in the quality of this lighting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all aware of the chronicle C.S. Lewis, and I have to say, and it's not the fault of the leader, but this whole project is like the narrative from some fairy tale. We have a situation now where one half of Burrells Walk, which is between Garrett Hostel Bridge and Queen's Road, has been renovated using the old lamps. I was there today. They look fantastic. We then have the second half of Burrells Walk, between Queen's Road and Grange Road, where we are living in the land of Narnia. It's like giants. These are 6-metre high poles, and they're spaced out. And actually, any member could have gone along today to see what the effect would be, because all the lights were on today, in daylight. So I do hope, and I know to be fair to the leader, he did invest a lot of time beforehand trying to make sure that the county and Balfour Beatty got this right. They haven't got it right. Will the leader give a commitment that the second half of Burrells Walk, there is remediation work undertaken, so the height of the lights are reduced to the same height as the first half of Burrells Walk, so that everybody can enjoy what is in effect a very unique part of the city.
I'm sorry that Council will not be there for 10:30 Trees with me next week. I'm hoping that Councillor Messing may be available. So we'll have a good look. And the lighting. I'm sure we'll come back having been well informed. So I will discuss the matter with Councillor Messing in your absence, Councillor.
The next question is down for Councillor Sinner. Is there anybody here who wishes to ask a question on Councillor Sinner's behalf?
My microphone won't work, so I'd like to ask question 5, please.
Ironically, it's about electric, so in response, obviously you were there as a joke, because the council said it wasn't. In terms of brief update, I won't go into all the absolute details. What I would recommend, if anyone is particularly interested in this topic, he wasn't at the committee, and is not licensed as well, where it's coming up. I would recommend you get the paperwork from online, the right to the June, where you go into quite a bit of detail about the strands of things that the government trying to do to encourage both electric and hybrid taxi uptake. In a nutshell, amongst the things that are in the report, taxi ranks, licensing fee waiver, it doesn't work. Keep up, Mr. Mayor. Tapering days, and obviously looking at ANPR. And obviously, if we do have electric and hybrid, we just give up on the microphone. If we do have electric and hybrid taxis, obviously there are issues to do with not only testing in terms of requiring less testing in terms of emissions, because obviously emissions, because they're not that polluted, but also in terms of the longevity of the vehicle would be an absolute. Apart from that, we've obviously got the earlier bids still going on. The paperwork, I believe, has now been sent to us last week, so the government will tell you what's going on there.
First comes the phrase,
and then the only other thing apart from that is obviously as taxis start appearing more frequently hybrid and electric, one thing which I would say, and I think we're more or less across all party lines here, is that we will probably look at the livery on the vehicles. Jeremy is free. We will look at the livery on the vehicles to encourage people and let them know that they are electric vehicles and that people see them.
No, that's not right. Do we have a supplementary?
That's, of course, very welcome to hear, considering that many of us are exceptionally worried about the levels of particulate in the air. We have many city centre schools where we have to work and children have to learn amidst increasingly high level of particulate. People have to play in our city centre parks, and doubtless people, particularly with those with lung problems, asthma, and also those who are worried about damage to our general environment, will be pleased to hear that. Could you please update us, just as an
thankfully are very limited. So there was an element of hatred at the time of the large assembly outside of the Guildhall, where the police had to control one individual. There was also some incidents of hate crime in relation to the protest about Orlando. So there was some racist graffiti on some lampposts in my own ward, but there's nothing specifically I'm glad to say that has been directed against Europeans in the way that it's happened in Huntingdon and elsewhere, which is a sign of the integration and support and warmth in this city. But yeah, we will continue to focus on hate crime, but I think in particular the continued incidents that tend to happen in this community tend to be against the LGBT community, but also against the Muslim and Asian communities.
What's that one, Andrew? Councillor Tom Jones.
Thank you. Yes, lucky second for you.
The City Guild Board, which I mentioned only rarely in this chamber, but mainly during council question time, and which I'm obviously going to have to respond to broader issues of scrutiny, had a very clear view about the local liaison forums, including that they should be set up separately for Histon and Milton Road. And it wasn't how I expected the first meeting of those local liaison forums to occur. So as I stated, following that meeting and in discussion with the chairs of the local liaison forums, both who expressed concern about both the setup but also some of the processes, I have had a long discussion with the county officers about them, and essentially meetings which were originally proposed for next week will now take place at a later date, because I'm not happy that the process has been set up in as effective a way as I would require. The local liaison forums are not there to suddenly redesign the whole scheme, but I just want to be particularly clear, to use a colloquial phrase, what is up for grabs. So I want to see, and the officers, we've had a discussion, more of a geographic focus to looking at each of the three of the sections of both roads, for it to be clear to residents what's involved, to look at those sections in a more integral way, so it isn't just looking at things like landscaping, public realm and trees as an afterthought. So process that their workshops are not, that have got a specific remit, that there could well be a longer time period in terms of looking to make sure the workshops are successful, and a process to engage residents in knowing what is going to be discussed, and particularly to have a stronger line on the landscaping.
Thank you, Herbert. Yes, I look forward as chair of the Histon Road Local Liaison Forum, and also I'm sure my colleague Jocelyn Scott as chair of the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum, to ensuring we do get the process right, and that's critical for the residents we represent. And I do appreciate very much the opportunity to talk with you, with City Board members and senior officers to make sure that happens. And would you agree with me that a period of reflection and to make sure this process is absolutely spot on for the future is a really important thing to do?
Well, I think the reflection is underway, and obviously residents' associations as well as local councillors in the area would like to know the pattern of the planned proposed meetings. So that will be occur. I think there's been considerable reflection in the last week, and I think it's important that we are in a position then to give clarity to residents and to councillors. They are local liaison forums. They can make their own recommendations or resolutions and proposals, but it just needs to be clear what their remit is. And I know that the local liaison forum in
I've been a councillor. So I think in conjunction with the amendment that Councillor Bick moved at the last meeting, there is a need just to look at the wider responsibility. So I know some people in this chamber single out the city deal as some kind of abhorrence, but it has its processes, and in addition to that, I'm accountable to this council.
Yeah, I think the leader rightly identified the priority. I would ask him whether he could trial the process that he agreed to follow with the new devolved authority, where he would discuss his voting intention in committees or even in his council chamber. Also, I wanted to ask whether he could ensure that the liaison forum input is actually evaluated not just at the offices level, but also at the assembly and the board level, because at the moment we have only been told that the resolutions of the liaison forum will be going to the project boards, which is largely making its decision outside the public eye. But I think given the extent of participation in these liaison forums, I think it's very, very crucial that there will be a public discussion and that the city is represented as much as it can.
As I answered to the previous question, the chair of each of the local liaison forums will have the opportunity, if they wish, to report both to the Assembly and to the board. So, whilst there's some confusion when officers refer to a term like project board, it's actually more a sort of an operational aspect where the officers are actually reviewing the scheme. That shouldn't be understated as the importance, because obviously getting the resident and the local liaison forum input into the officers at the early stage is as important, but at the time when decisions are then made by the Assembly, or the recommendations are made by the Assembly, and final decisions are made by the board. I mean, on the broader issue, the governance, which I restate wasn't invented by us, has a process whereby the Assembly does a large amount of the pre-scrutiny, and each of the different parties is represented on that. And as is evidenced by successive meetings, including yesterday's meeting of the board does listen to the Assembly. So the Assembly gives a great opportunity. I haven't got in my head what the scrutiny proposals will be. It's not for me as leader to decide that, but we've committed to a report to Civic Affairs, Mr. Mayor, and in that we will take account of other issues as well as the particular focus on devolution. Sadly, pre-scrutiny isn't often going to be possible on some of the issues simply because of the timings.
Question 9.
There you go. Well, I'll be brief. I mean, essentially, we've seen that there's been changes. In a way, what's the good news of the last few weeks? Well, one element is that certainty must matter, and that there being a new team in government to take these issues forward. So the prospect of us not knowing, say, until just before the 20th of October council meeting here or other council meetings elsewhere, exactly where the government stands on devolution would be a matter of huge concern. I expect that the government will clarify what their approach is. My personal view was always that there's too much good in devolution for both the government, but also for the potential in it for the government suddenly to rat on some of the commitments that have been made. But one of the things, Councillor Smart, that we're particularly keen on doing is making sure that the ministers that are now in position, and Greg Clark's moved to a different part of the devolution position, and now I think we've got David. We will want to have a totally clear commitment on affordable housing, both on the commitment to the 70 million for council housing and the wider affordable housing commitment, as a statement of councillors elected from this city could actually be the link on a number of those issues. And to some extent, the devolution recreates Peterborough and Cambridge and gives a say. And also gives us a responsibility to get some of the decisions right for the wider Cambridgeshire. And I thirdly come back to bus franchising. We are committed at the city deal to tackle congestion and transport, but unless we can have more of an equal relationship with Stagecoach, we really cannot tackle some of the challenges of buses and transport. And bus franchising is a real opportunity.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I recognise this is highly unusual, but we've had 2 members of the public who have waited since 6 p.m. for oral question number 13, which is one which hopefully is not controversial to the Chamber. And I know it's going against all protocol, Mr. Mayor, but I'm conscious of the fact that timing is such that we will not get to oral question 13, and we don't normally get members of the public waiting so long and patient.
Thank you, Councillor Cantrell. Had the Mayor been aware that the members of the public have been waiting this long to hear that particular oral question, the Mayor is quite a benevolent type of person. would have quite willingly taken it at that stage. But to find at this late stage in the debate process, knowing that it is on the agenda paper so late, and I would say that we have never before managed 9 questions at public questions, that I believe somebody could have made me aware of this earlier, and I would have accepted it. But given that I've been sitting up here till since 6 p.m, and I'm quite keen to have a break at this point, I would, on this occasion, be prepared to take 1 question after the break, if the council is in agreement that we take that question.
I think that I really appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. It's completely my fault. I accept that, but I would really appreciate that. And I don't think, to be fair, I think the leader's very keen to answer that question with us properly.
If the council is in agreement with taking 1 question when we come back, can I propose a short break, because we're quite ahead of time? I'm suggesting 20 minutes. Back in at 20 minutes to 9. A bit like at the start of episode 2 of the Wings of War, I'll give you a quick update of where we are before we go for refreshments. As a complete one-off, not setting any precedent, I am going to allow question 13 to be asked now, because we have had members of the public who have been sitting waiting for this, which I was not made aware earlier in the afternoon. I would say, at this point, that I would be very disappointed if any councillors used bringing members of the public in to try and shuffle their questions up. And I'm looking equally around the chamber for that one in the future, and I may not be so benevolent in the future if this happens again. This is a complete one-off. At which point I say, Councillor Aitken.
Well, the answer could be a very short one, but I won't let you off for that, councillors. So, I mean, I think the answer is that it will make no difference, and the value of our links with Heidelberg and Szeged will be the more important as a result of what's happened. There is a moderate budget in the council's budget for twinning arrangements, both a group that works with Heidelberg and a group with Szeged. And whilst there's still decisions to be made in next year's budget, I would make a risky but firm commitment that the budget will be there at the same, at least level that we've got currently.
Thank you, Mayor. How does the authority propose to increase the profile of our 220 links?
Well, next year is the 30th anniversary, and we met with the Szeged Society along with the Mayor, and we discussed some ideas of increasing
remember that we have a very close affiliation, whatever the parties in this chamber, with the spirit of the people running Xenia. In terms of Heidelberg, we've already heard that we will now have Mr. Payne as one of the people as part of the Heidelberg Society, so I would expect similarly that we will have that strong link. I mean, these things go back decades. I don't think it's right that we kind of twin with every country. I think the fact that we've got two strong relationships is really important. And it's building on those. That's the strategy, and it's the strategy that both councils, both parties have adopted while running the council.
Thank you. And that does conclude all questions, and many apologies to members of the public who had to sit through the meeting so far. You are now free to go if you so wish. You could wish to stay with us for the rest of the evening. It promises to be actually quite an interesting debate. We now turn to agenda item 5A, and the motion entitled EU referendum and hate crimes. It had been agreed with me that Councillor O'Connell would second the motion and has therefore withdrawn motion C. I now understand it will be seconded by another member of the Liberal Democrat group, and I will offer the same offer to that person I would have offered to Councillor O'Connell, in that given the spirit in which the other motion had been withdrawn, I would give that person the same amount of time to speak as the mover of the motion is going to get. So at that point, I call on Councillor Ratcliffe to propose the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start with your permission with just a bit of housekeeping. There's a good reason that the saying a week is a long time in politics is such a cliche. So I'd, with your permission, like to propose a very minor amendment, simply for your accuracy. The first resolve, I suggest that we resolve to write to the new Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Brexit, asking for a clear statement supporting the rights of EU citizens already here in Cambridge to remain in the UK. I honestly didn't expect to say Secretary of State for Brexit, but that's the new reality. If that's acceptable. I'll also just going to thank Councillor O'Connell for agreeing to second it, and moving her motion. I'll do that in her absence, and thank Councillor Gary for stepping in. And with that, I suppose we move on to the main motivation for the motion. I really don't want this to be a rerunning of any referendum debate. That's a debate that is probably more suited for the club, probably not tonight. But regardless of your opinion on the referendum itself, potential consequences for Cambridge, but massive and really quite obvious, and it's those factors I want to address. The detailed work in negotiating our exit from the EU is still to come, and it's clear that there was no government plan in advance of the referendum, and our new Prime Minister has been thrown somewhat in the deep end by peers who created the situation and ran away from dealing with the consequences of it. Again, the pace of politics means that's some while today, and I see that Boris Johnson is now back again. We've already heard tonight 9,000 Cambridge residents directly affected by this as EU citizens. 9,000 of our residents left in limbo, no idea whether they're welcome or even allowed to remain in the city that we call our home. As well as obviously sympathising with them, it's important to remember that these people, as part of our community, contribute to the well-being of us all and to the city. Cambridge University's Hospitals Trust Stanford categorise themselves as white, but not British or Irish, and just over 1,000, 12% of the employees there. Meanwhile, Cambridge University students from other EU countries make up 16% of the student population. And 15% of academic staff across UK universities come from other EU countries. This is just a few headline figures that highlight something we all know. Immigrants, whether they're from the EU or otherwise, not only make up a significant proportion of our population, but also play vital roles in our community. This also isn't news, but it bears stating that Adam Brooks, one of the biggest hospitals in the country, has had to ask patients to stay away several times in the last year due to resourcing levels. And the reasons for this are manifold, but staffing is a huge concern, and one that will only get worse if more than 10 staff are told they cannot remain in their jobs. Our universities have long been international organisations, knowledge and innovation. They don't respect borders, boundaries. The UK received 22% funding has meant that we've been at the forefront of research across many fields, and some of these projects are now seriously under threat. Though the universities and health service are major employers and innovators in Cambridge, it's naive to think they're the only organisations that have EU citizens who operate in our city. The science park, the IT industry, hospitality, many other organisations throughout Cambridge and the county really do rely on EU citizens. And this leads me on to the second thread in our motion. Anyone who knows me at all knows that just how personal issues of hate crime are to me. My political upbringing wasn't party-based, I would never have been politically active if it wasn't for Asian friends of mine in college being targeted, abused, occasionally physically assaulted by racists, by organised racists, their supporters. I had the dubious pleasure of growing up in East Lancashire in the midst of the race riots in the early noughties. I'll get through this bit quickly because many of my colleagues have heard this for me thousands of times. But as a result of standing up to this racism, I was attacked on the street. Conde 18 posted the address of my parents' house, shipped past my store. My parents' house was attacked. I was confronted at work by organised gangs. Yes, they thought that they could intimidate me into silence. This isn't to talk about me too much. But if this can happen to a middle-class, comfortable white lad, I'd like to say I can only imagine what could happen to an immigrant or a member of an ethnic minority. I say I'd like to say I can only imagine because I can't only imagine. I've witnessed it several times. And I really fear that it's something that could well start happening again. The EU referendum, it's clearly been a flashpoint for anti-immigrant sentiment. It's emboldened those who already hold racist views to impose them on others and to shout them out loud and clear. We all know the examples locally-ish. Cards describing Polish vermin just up the road in Huntingdon. The police translator lives in Finland who's Lithuanian and was abused in public for her own heritage and defending a Polish man who was being abused. These are just two examples from close to Cambridge, and they just serve to illustrate a pattern across the country. It's been reported in many national newspapers and confirmed by several police forces. As a 16-year-old politically naive lad in Blackburn, all I wanted to do was shout. I do think at times it's important to shout. I was proud here in Cambridge to march with my stepkids and several people in the room today in a celebration of a multicultural society in response to the attentions the EDL turned to our town. It was important then to shout, to say what we believe. And I really think that this too is one of those times when we might need to shout, or at least say loudly, clearly, that we stand alongside people feeling intimidated or facing abuse simply because of their nationality. But shouting alone isn't enough. That's why I specifically referenced our safer communities team and cooperation with the police. The work that officers have done to help build links between various communities and groups, it really does make a difference. I've been so impressed in my 2 years on the council with several of our officers and the schemes that we put forward. And they've worked to combat extremism within specific communities. They've helped build bridges between communities. They've enabled normal residents of the city to get involved in this work themselves. I think we should always be looking to expand this work and to form new partnerships. And when I first wrote this, it lasted a lot longer than this, but yes, I know, it's through somewhat. Anyhow, the EU citizens living here contribute massively to Cambridge. They deserve to stay. We as a council, I'd like to think, believe this, no doubt discover. And we want an acknowledgement from central government that this really is a red line. And we stand united against racism and xenophobia, examples of which we've seen thankfully little of within Cambridge itself so far, but we must remain forever vigilant against. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Do you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I should probably declare an interest. I have an EU passport, and therefore this is a motion that's very close to my heart. I don't have a British passport. I didn't vote in this referendum. I think we shouldn't forget that large parts of the affected population didn't have a vote. And I think it behooves us as a community to actually stand up for those who didn't have a voice in this affair. atmosphere of normal school playgrounds. And my fear is that if we as communities don't stand together, we might have exactly that same atmosphere in our own playgrounds. Right? For the first time since the referendum or in the referendum debate, my own kids were asked, so are you really British? Right? So what kind of passport do you have? I find that really weird because we've been living in this community for such a long time and it was never an issue, right? I think this resolution underlines that there's a huge concern at the community level about this decision. And I think there's huge pressure on the central government to actually manage it in a way that does not change the atmosphere, that does not throw out multiculturalism, that doesn't throw out or doesn't make immigration from other parts of the European continent completely impossible. I think the way in which immigration is used, the way in which 350 million per week were just thrown around, and then the way in which experts were derided because they had received EU funding was just outrageous when we know 90% of research funding nowadays is channeled through the EU. So if we go down that spiral, I think we end up with not just a community, but maybe a country that would betray its founding values. I think many people are very concerned about this situation because it affects life plans very directly. It affects how neighbors interact with each other. And I think as a city council, we have a particular obligation to basically tell our communities, tell our neighborhoods, tell individual neighbors that no form of discrimination, no form of hate crime, no form of xenophobia is allowed in Cambridge. Cambridge is an inclusive city. Cambridge, with its 2 universities, relies on its international connections, and we cannot lose them. And we need to actually, now is the time to pull all those levers that Cambridge has in Westminster. Now is the time to actually reactivate all those fundamental connections that so many people, and the fun place that Cambridge has for so many people in professional positions everywhere in British society. I think even just suggesting that, we could reintroduce visas, we could expel all the EU citizens, and that could somehow figure in our negotiations, in how the future relationship with the European Union is shaped up, I find absolutely disgraceful. And I think, in a way, that should be part of the letter that we're going to send to the MPs, that we're going to send to the new Secretary of State with this brand new ministerial building for Brexit. Because I think even suggesting that there could be a point in which all fundamental values, all fundamental rights of all residents in this country could just be suspended fills me with fear. And it's the first time that I thought, well, I was always a Republican at heart, but for the first time, I hope that more parts of society would actually speak up. And there's definitely a role for the royal family to maybe be more proactive and go out there to the polar centers that are subject to attacks by firebombs, and send a signal to certain parts of society that have an interest in xenophobia. And I think that's what this motion does. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hickey?
I'm sure everybody in this chamber this evening will endorse the sentiments contained in this motion. And because I anticipate that will be the case, I'm going to strike not a discordant note, but a note of warning. We're asked to bear in mind the wider reasons for the exit vote. And I want to turn to those wider reasons, because I think they have implications for Cambridge, the Cambridge psychology, the Cambridge sense of itself. A book that has impressed me more than almost anything else I have read in recent years, and I regret I cannot remember the authors, but the name of the book is The Spirit Level. And it analyzes in very clear detail the ways in which inequality are working throughout the global system and between individual nations and within individual nations. And Britain and America are among the most unequal societies in the world. We live in a county which has got some of the widest inequalities in Europe. It's very good to remind us, 75% of the people of the city voted to remain. 75% of the people of Finland voted to leave. Is that because they're stupid? Is that because they don't understand the issues? There's a slight tendency among Cambridge folk to pat themselves on the back for being so clever and for being so liberal. No, the reason that the people of Finland voted to leave is because they see no benefit at all in belonging to Europe. They see no rise in their incomes. They're not getting massive grants thrown at them from Brussels to improve their life chances, while people here in Cambridge are receiving in abundance funds from Europe that, yes, go into worthy research purposes, but also, may I say, line the pockets of those professional workers who are working on those schemes. So we can understand why we are so enlightened about the contribution that Europe makes to the life of the city. Sorry? Time. Well, or let me conclude then by simply saying that I think we should bear in mind that Cambridge is a privileged city. And one of the tests of the way that we respond to the devolution deal will be the extent to which we are prepared to share all the benefits of that deal with the people who frankly need it most, the people at the north of the county.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am one of the ones who was born in Cyprus, and I came here about 40 years ago. But whether you come 40 years ago or 2 years ago, I think the welcome has always been the same. We are very grateful to this country and these people who have embraced us, who are liberal enough to accept us and generous enough to give us the university education and share their culture and expertise with us. I'm very concerned to also read that the racist attacks are up 42% from last year. Speaking to the Greek community, they said they're very concerned on the uncertainty, what's going to happen if they're going to be thrown back to Greece or if they're going to be allowed to stay. And secondly, they are concerned about the emotional distress caused to the young children in school by the accent like me, and sometimes they cannot find the correct English word to express themselves eloquently, it does not mean that they are less intelligent. Remember, they speak another language fluently, and they can most definitely express themselves eloquently in their own mother tongue. We should not make people with an accent feel like second-class citizens. We have learned over the years, including myself, to turn the other cheek when we are racially abused. Even when I was approached by a feisty lady in the park, and she said to me, words like, how dare you do something for a gay councillor? I just smiled and turned the other cheek. If one responds to those remarks, it's like pouring oil into the fire. I would therefore like to ask for your support on Mr. Washington, and we are very proud to live in a diverse and tolerant society. Racism and xenophobia does not have hate crimes do not have place in our city. Our city contains racism, xenophobia, and hate crimes. We will not allow hate to become acceptable. And I would also like to publicly condemn any such attacks and make it clear that we do support the people who live here, and I'm confident that they do, all the Europeans who are here, the majority of them, do make a positive contribution to our city's ongoing success. Thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as speakers have already said, racism and xenophobia have no place in this city. But I am grateful to Councillor Hipkin for going for a slightly different angle to most, and I wanted to just continue that very, very slightly. The book he's talking about, because I've just Googled it, John, was written by Richard G. Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, if that helps you in future. When we last debated before the referendum in this chamber, I abstained on a vote there because I was a little bit, or actually wasn't sure which way I was going to go. In the end, I voted Remain. But I do understand that I sat at a polling station in King's Hedges, seeing people coming into the polling station who had never been in a polling station in their lives, and they were in their 50s, and they were coming for all sorts of different reasons. So John, or Councillor Hipkin expanded it out. I was just going to contain it to people within the city. Listen, when life has treated you fairly badly, when you think that no particular government of any persuasion is looking after your interests, when you're offered the choice between maintain the status quo or a little bit of a leap into the unknown, maybe that leap into the unknown will be beneficial for you. It might not, but is life going to get necessarily any worse for you? So I think a great many people, and that's in Cambridge, but across the country, have done just that. They have done it to kick the establishment. Maybe not understand. No, that's wrong. I can't say not understanding, but they've done it just to give the establishment a bit of a kicking. We're left with the aftermath, whatever it is. But I'm just going to make the point that I think I saw it somewhere on social media that said that not everybody that voted to leave the European Union is a racist, but you can be probably sure that most racists voted to leave the European Union. So we have to draw that distinction and not be, as Councillor Hipkin said, typically Cambridge, we're right, everybody else is wrong. You have to understand, as the motion is asking for, why people voted.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been some very thoughtful contributions to this motion, which I think really address the issues that are being raised, which are of tolerance. And that's why this motion is extremely timely. So I think I just wanted to make the brief point to remind everybody here that we as city councils have an important and vital role to play in the promotion of the values of decency and tolerance, respect, and the appreciation of other cultures and other people, other communities and groups. Because that is our duty as representatives in and outside of this chamber. And beyond the wording of this motion, I think it's incredibly important that we continue to prize our role and our position, use it wisely. Because, and I've said this many times, I've said this quote many times over the last month, as the late Jo Cox said, herself a victim of intolerance and hatred, there is more in common than that which divides us. We need to heed that message, we need to promote that message right as possible, and it's part of our duty as elected representatives to ensure that we meet that challenge. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we were campaigning for a Remain vote before the referendum, we as councillors and other Romsey activists were spoken to by so many residents in Romsey who could not vote because they were European citizens living and working in this city. One of the reasons I love this city is that it's diverse, it is welcoming, it is multicultural. For me personally, it's bad enough losing my European citizenship, but I certainly don't want to live in a place where that welcome, that diversity, and that multiculturalism is taken away. Those people from ethnic minorities, those who have come here from other countries, deserve to be safe and to feel safe in this city. And those EU citizens who have done us the great honour of choosing to live in this city deserve to stay. And if we can do anything by putting that pressure on the government, then I think it's something we should do and do proudly. Thank you.
Thank you. I welcome this motion from Councillor Radcliffe, and I particularly welcome his emphasis in his opening remarks on the importance of those who come to this country, contributing not only to our broader economy, but also to our public services. I know from meetings that I have attended with the Chief Executive of Addenbrooke's and the Directors of Social Care, just how dependent our health and care sector is on recruits from both within the EU and from other EU countries. For some years, our newspapers and sadly too many politicians have painted economic migrants as those who come to take from our welfare system. And in fact, it is in this area, our welfare system depends hugely on economic migrants who come to work in our hospitals and our schools and our care homes. I'm delighted that this motion gives us an opportunity to make clear the crucial role that immigrants have played throughout our history in this country. Sometimes in debates like this, where there is clear cross-party agreement, it can seem as if it's a waste of time. But I feel that this debate is extremely valuable in allowing everybody in this chamber to express their solidarity with those who come to the
really important that we should recognise that anything that we do in Cambridge needs to be spread wider than Cambridge. We need to send our messages further than this. I would also say that as the representative on the police and crime panel for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, that I asked the new PCC if he would get the police to issue statements to say that they would welcome or support this situation. And he sort of dodged the issue and said this was a national matter and not a matter for local police. And that caused me a little bit of concern, bearing in mind some of the things that are going on around him at this moment. But I just wanted to say that I did witness really difficult conversations. The most important thing people wanted to talk to me about in Finland was I going to stay in Europe or not? And some of their responses were, we're very polite in Cambridge, people don't want to talk to you, they go, I'd rather not, or thanks very much, but in Finland they had a different response, and it wasn't at all pleasant, and a lot of it was extremely racist. So we do need to recognise we're very privileged, very, very privileged.
Councillor Roberts?
Obviously a lot of things said today. I disagree with one aspect of, while I appreciate that, as someone obviously voted, unsurprisingly, very much in my own interests, to remain in the European Union. In terms of, the European referendum, in terms of the franchise, followed that of UK general elections, which I think was, to be fair, relatively fair in terms of the electorate of the country. What I would say, though, is that it's very easy in life to oppose something. It's very easy to oppose something with simple language and terminology and so on, but it's actually in favour of something. A couple of people mentioned tonight in Finland, obviously years ago, I was the parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party, and it was a horrific experience. It was unsurprising when we weren't exactly very popular. But one thing that did strike me is when people talk about migration, areas like just outside of Finland and further afield like Boston and areas within Cambridgeshire, Wisbech especially, Waterloo Ward and around there, Brink, North Brink and so on, those areas, which have a very high level of migration. Many of the issues that local people are concerned of, when I say local people, I mean English-born people, with the migrant population, should have been solved by very simple changes in national legislation and enforcement of existing national legislation. They were concerned about undercutting wages. Well, if we actually chose to enforce gang master legislation properly in the agrarian economy, they were talking about the low wages and driving down standards and all the rest, overpopulation of housing. There was housing regulation that was enforced throughout Finland that enabled things like that to happen. Many of the issues I think were conflated, that now have been conflated with migration, have been conflated over the last few months. A complete failure of national legislation to mitigate the effects on a country which is deeply divided and stratified by a failure of social mobility over a number of years. It's no surprise that one of Nick Griffin's first jobs was working in Finland, teaching the Portuguese community English. And we're more than happy to take migrant labour to pick out fruit and have cheap food in the stores from the 70s, from the Spanish and Portuguese who came over then all the way through to 2004 when we opened the borders. More than happy to all the cheap labour when we go and purchase things. More businesses are more than happy to have the state subsidise, essentially through a completely different form of state subsidy, through paying in-work benefits to these people, because their employees don't pay them enough to actually afford to live. But my God, if they get ill, or if they want to put their child into primary school, it's horrific. And I finish on one other one. When I was the DPC in Finland, I was also the governor of local schools there, and it was quite telling that one of the big issues we had on the local school that I was the governor of was the truancy levels within the school. And when we actually sent teachers out to find out why people weren't turning to primary school, the response was very simply that there was no prospect for those individuals, so why bother sending them to school from that age? So that shows the level of aspiration.
Just a couple of points. Firstly, I think we should all welcome this motion. I think we should respect the referendum, as Councillor Ratcliffe mentioned. I think there are a lot of people in Cambridge who did vote Remain, who are feeling saddened by what happened, and there also feeling sad in Cambridge. I think we're very fortunate in this city, as members have indicated, that we are a socially inclusive city in general, and you know, the diversity of people who live in this city is one of the key features of why we have such a richness of culture. But I do think, as members have highlighted, that what the referendum was about for many people in this country, not just people in Fenland, but look at people in Wales. Wales voted to leave, and they are one of the key beneficiaries financially of funding from Europe. It was a protest vote against the political class, of which we all are part. And that protest vote, in effect, was registered last year, not this year. 4 million people voted for UKIP last year, and they got 1 MP. Now, if they'd got a few more MPs, we might have seen how crazy UKIP are, and they may have taken a different view. But that is an indication of that remoteness to political parties that people felt and expressed it during the referendum. And I've been campaigning outside the city in Cambridge for Europe, and it's amazing how as soon as you, even if you get to Histon and Impington, there is a different feel. And it was striking how they do have a different view of the city, even then, even before you get to Wisbech, in relation to the success of the city and whether they're really benefiting from it. And it's something we have a challenge as members to actually try and address in some shape or form. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If there's no further debate, Councillor Herbert, as I guess leader of the council.
Well, just firstly on the issue of division in the city, just following up Councillor Garen's point, whilst the police didn't report hate incidents or hate crimes, they had over that couple of weeks a large number of reports from school playgrounds effectively. So one of the issues that has been bigger elsewhere than in Cambridge, but significant in Cambridge, is this playing the issues through the children. Adults themselves nurse views, share views of children. Sometimes adults who don't go out and actually then take action or make statements in the public, but the number of parents, including this sort of feeling, which is big in other parts of the country still, that the EU citizen should go home. That isn't crime, but there was that. Now, some of that, I think, was an immediate reaction, a feeling that we've stuck one on the establishment, that there's been some kind of say that some of the people Councillor Price said that hadn't voted and felt that at last they had a say in something that they felt was right. Whatever we individually, or the different people who've got different views in this chamber, whatever we think, there was definitely a feeling from a portion of the British public that this was the first time that they had a say, whether we agree with them. And that just shows how excluded and disenfranchised a bunch of people in this country have thought they'd be. Anyway, so that's just a comment on that. But I think the key, that issue really matters, the integration and respect that people are shown. But the main issue, certainly for me, as part of a broader discussion with MPs, with other councillors, with the wider community, within trying to get the best deal for Cambridge in the new environment, is this issue of the 9,000 citizens that are already here. Because, as again Councillor Gary and others have said, they are not bargaining chips. They are here already. If the government is going to take a line, then, Mr. Mayor, they take a line from now. So they are our people. I think they've got a contract with the UK, and that's why, if the motion's passed, this will continue to be my core issue on Europe until we get this resolved.
Councillor Radcliffe, after Brian.
I will be very brief, don't worry. Just a couple of things that from debate come down to me. I almost start to say, Councillor Gary, I'm glad you mentioned the incident in the playground. I'm not glad at all. These things are awful, but it is But they were fair points, and it is easy to lose. You know, in the bubble of Cambridge and our sort of comfortable small L liberalism, that this isn't the experience we have of life, isn't the experience a lot of people in this country have. There are lots of reasons why people voted to leave. And I don't think that racism was the main one there at all. I think it's possible and indeed essential to condemn racist intimidation, violence, the sort of things we've been seeing. And at the same time, really respect the choice of people to vote whichever way they please on issues like this. I hope it's been clear enough in the text of the motion through the debate that this is not about condemning people for their choice there. There is a very separate issue going on there. And with that, I'll leave it. Thank you.
I will now go to the vote. Please can I say all those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. We now move to agenda item 5B, the motion entitled Viability Assessment for Affordable Housing. A brief note has been circulated and copied into the information pack. Councillor Blencowe has given notice of an amendment which is sent out in your information pack, seconded by Councillor Price. I am now calling on Councillor Pitt to move now the motion.
Mr. Mayor, before I do that, I am happy with the amendments that Councillor Blencowe has proposed. I think I need to quote Rule 26 to express consent of the Council to alter the motion to include it, so we can just have one debate.
Is the Council content with that?
Mr. Mayor, I think the proposition advanced in this motion is a very important one for this Council, and I welcome Councillor Blencowe's willingness to see this measure as potentially helping us in the delivery on the transparency that is integral to the way I think all councillors in the Chamber would like to see our business done. Affordable housing delivered through new developments is key to our meeting the needs of local people and people who need homes to carry on jobs in our local economy. Although even the affordable housing is hardly ever cheap by virtue of the high market levels it's pegged to, it does offer an accessibility that would otherwise not be the case. And it's also a bulwark against the sense that new homes can simply be mopped up as financial assets by investors and left empty or underutilised. And it helps us also to ensure that the city and its surroundings are less socially exclusive, more socially balanced than they threaten to become otherwise. Targets for affordable homes within new developments are carefully set with reference to need and to the affordability of market prices. And it's no surprise to any of us that at 40% our target has been set as one of the highest around the country. And we intend in the new local plan, when it's approved, that this will continue. And it's a matter of huge public social importance and interest. So, when developers come along with their plans, seeking a way out of meeting our targets, this is a matter of enormous disquiet. The government has made this much too easy. Previously, it took truly exceptional circumstances, which were likely to have to be justified and assessed at the highest level if an application was refused because of it. This carried the jeopardy of a costly and exposed process, which a developer could well lose, as Countryside did when we as a council were challenged at Clay Farm on the Southern Fringe. And when they lost it, they started work the very following week. In an area of big development pressure, that way of dealing with matters seemed to us appropriate and reasonable. More recently, it seemed that developers have been encouraged to regard their affordable housing obligation as the easiest of their parameters to get waived, the first to go. For example, if they got their own sums wrong and overpaid for their land. it's a concern that the current situation can be seen as removing an important check on rising land prices. I'm told in London that the submission of viability assessments is relatively routine on the part of developers. Now, it's good that that is not the case here at this point, but we've certainly started to experience that downside here too. As we said in our debate on the Council's budget earlier this year, and again when we on our side outlined our opposition annual statement, this Council must find new ways of addressing this. We cannot afford to let valuable, affordable homes just slip through our fingers. This is too important for that. Even dealt the difficult hand we have been, we need to scour the country for best practice. And it's in that spirit that I wanted to keep this subject high on our agenda by highlighting the way London authorities are managing to turn into reality some of our hopes and our aims. This is a matter of much too high importance to be handled behind closed doors. If it has to be done at all, we must find ways of doing it in the open. If developers decide to make a case that delivering the target level of affordable housing is unviable, they should at least have to square this off against their commercial confidentiality and any perceived competitive disadvantage that openness might leave them with. The best of both worlds should not be available for something that should never ideally have been allowed to happen in the first place. This process should rarely occur, or never. It must not be an easy option, and it must carry some jeopardy to the initiator of it. It's a logical extension to consider the Greenwich policy not only for the city, but to coordinate doing so with South Cambridgeshire if they too are willing. We share some of our development control functions with them at the urban fringes that lie between us, which would have been relevant in the case of the wing development, and we are working towards a single local plan next time round, recognising the high level of interdependence between us. As we go forward with growth in Greater Cambridge, achieving the policy target of 40% affordable housing in South Cambridgeshire is as important to us as it is for them, especially, for example, at Northstowe, where there's been so far a very large falling short of their 40% target. Now, I understand that a change in our policy to adopt Greenwich's approach for transparency would need to be hung onto new supplementary planning documents supporting the draft local plan when it's approved. And I understand that it would also require proper public consultation. But I think we're at the point where it's helpful for the Council to express a strong, in-principle support and interest in this idea so that officers can take it into account as they work towards preparing those documents. So I do hope, Mr Mayor, that it will be possible to win full-hearted support from the Council for this motion, as it's been strengthened, I think, by the Executive Council's additional work. And I think it's very important that members' feelings about the importance of achieving our affordable housing target need to be expressed not only in this Council, but also heard clearly outside it too.
Do I have a second now? You wish to speak now? Councillor Hicken.
I'd like to echo those remarks that have just been uttered by Councillor Dick. I do hope that the whole Council will give their support to this motion and to the happy acceptance by the Lib Dems of the Labour amendment. However, I always get uneasy when I feel a consensus coming on. I phoned Greenwich a couple of days ago and spoke to their chief planning officer and asked them what effect their viability policy was having. And to reduce a long conversation to a few words, the effect is hard to tell because no applications have been received since the policy was introduced in which viability has been an issue. what we ought to have. We have the vision. But the job on the ground is done by developers. That's very, very occasionally do we become ourselves a developer. But generally speaking, housing in this country is produced on the ground, constructed by commercial developers. And commercial developers are essentially commercial. They have to consider questions of profit and loss in a way that we don't. We can go on insisting that they provide the 40% of social or affordable housing that we would like to see for us until the cows come home. That's not difficult for us. But I do ask you to remember an earlier question about the state of the property market, commercial property market, and how that has within the last few weeks suddenly turned into a very negative state. So developers are themselves subject to these huge variations in the state of the economy and of the housing market. And we have to be very careful that in our insistence on the full 40%, when only 30 or 20 or 15% is being offered, that we do not take up a too hard and fast position such that we don't get any social housing at all. So I think this is, this is just something to be borne in mind. And if I may just conclude, may be very, very tolerant. I think one of the things about the viability assessments that have been produced is this automatic belief that developers are entitled to a 20% profit. Why? And why aren't we entitled, as an authority, to an assurance on equal terms of a proper level of social housing?
Thank you. Councillor Hipkin overran by 50 seconds, so I will extend that to everybody else who wishes to speak.
No, take it on to the next speaker.
We know who to aim. Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, sir. Well, I would just like to add a word as a member of the Planning Committee in favour of this motion, and I would hope that Councillor Hipkin and my fellow colleagues on the Planning Committee might support me in this. Over the past several months when the Planning Committee meets, I have become increasingly despondent to see the way that the viability question has
Councillor Blenco's amendment, making this one complete motion. It was never intended as a wrecking amendment. Pleased that it was taken in the spirit it was intended. There's one thing that is I keep hearing said, and it's target. It's the target. It's less of a target, more of a policy requirement. The 40%. I mean, I think target is possibly the wrong word. However, it's in the motion, and I think we know it. We know what it means. And Councillor Hipkin was quite very touched on the sort of developers' divine right to get 20% profit, and the only movable part of the whole feast seems to be in the level of the affordable housing of the 40%. Twice now, two places have been mentioned. Severn Place, which Councillor Tunnicliffe mentioned, and I went to that planning committee and spoke against the reduction, as did other councillors who are not on the planning committee, against that. I also voted against the decrease in affordable housing on the wing development, because, as Councillor Pick said, we cannot afford as a city to be losing the level of affordable housing that we are. Appreciate what Councillor Hipkin said about the Greenwich example, and that may well be, time will tell, or maybe that because it's there, developers aren't trying it on anymore. It may just be there and stopping them doing it. So it may never get to be seen in the way that Councillor Hipkin seen it, which is sort of, there are other councils that are doing similar things. I shall leave most of this now to Councillor Blenco, who is summing up, but just to say, fully support this motion as it is written now.
Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. I think also we should look very clearly as a council at the outcome of the lack of affordable homes. We are in a situation where council housing is reducing continually, where housing for the people in the more disadvantaged sector, therefore, is less available. And when we drop from 40 to 30 to allow viability on a site just recently, and I'm not sure about the legality of discussing planning issues here, because we're supposed to be free votes on that situation, but in a place where people, I could never understand how we went down to 30%, because the place seemed more than viable unless there could be plenty of money around. And of course I spoke at the last meeting about a family of 4 people, one of them pregnant, living in one single room. I bring good news. The birth went through well, but now we have 5 people living in one room in that same house. And this is a long-term outcome of bad planning, of bad policy and government interference. So thank you for that opportunity.
Councillor Baker, I have no further speakers. Second. 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
So I had the advantage of reading Councillor Vick's speech earlier this afternoon. I had a quiet moment, and so I read all of that. And I wanted to, in the second information, I wanted to strike a slightly different note. And it's interesting that some of the comments that Councillor Hipkin was making fits in quite well with what I wanted to say, which is that we know that we can't build houses fast enough ourselves. We are reliant on the developers. We have to treat them as our partners in this. We can't treat them as the enemy, but we have to accept that they're commercial. And commercial people, what they don't like is uncertainty, and what they do like is certainty. I think they'll rise to the challenge of knowing what the rules are clearly and early. So my experience of commercial people doing this kind of thing is that the sooner they know what the rules are, the more they will rise to the challenge. If we give them the opportunity to come to it later in the game, well then of course they'll take that opportunity. So it's too soon to say what's going to happen in Greenwich, and maybe nothing will happen in Greenwich. And then I do have a sort of slight worry now, because it is clearly important that when we come to write this supplementary that we are going to commercially negotiate it. And the way that we do that is we set out the rules, we set out that this is our policy requirement. I agree that that's the right terminology. So policy requirements, a challenge they need to rise to. And the sooner we do that, the better, and the more housing hopefully we will get. So I support the amendment. I did check the council members to see if I could make that Council Price did do that, but I'll have to go and review the video because it's not in the minutes, but I'm sure if he said he did, and it's good to see it again. Yes, I support the amendment, I support the original motion, and I think we should all vote for it and go with it as soon as we can.
Councillor Blencoe, representing the councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was quite happy to accept the motion. It's been a pertinent issue that's had quite a bit of discussion in different forums and is currently very prevalent, especially on in light of a particular application which will come to planning commission in the near future. In terms of the topic of tail, as it were, I think it was important to publicly say that this is not something we have not considered previously. So Councillor Price certainly referred to this on the back of an agenda item at the February meeting. We certainly had discussions about this issue within planning briefings and other related briefings. One or two of them on most recent viability assessment discussions, and two of those, so at least one of those examples has been alluded to. In terms of the sort of tail of this amendment, yes, in effect, Greenwich had sort of put themselves forward to pilot an approach which required a sort of complete transparency on liability assessments. Interestingly, I thought they had one example, but maybe that was prior to them deciding this new policy. But certainly other London authorities and boroughs have realised that this is going to be a pertinent issue for them to address, and that's why that London group has been established to discuss and share the sort of practice and thoughts of people involved in this matter. And similarly, on our own smaller footprint, we've got to acknowledge our sort of relationship with South Cambridgeshire, both in terms of shared service, particularly in our joint development control joint working. And clearly, one of the recent examples was a joint application that spread over boundaries and actually brought a lot of these issues, I think, about the value of transparency fairly squarely into the discussion and into our thoughts, because in the end, planning committee members, whether it be on a city committee or the joint committee, are being asked to make very tough decisions. They're being given evidence and assessment and applications of material on which to make those decisions. Sometimes it's a difficult decision as it is, but in terms of viability, there is this, I think, quite relevant public pressure for us as representatives of the community to disclose the information we are making our decisions upon. I think that's the point of the motion, for us to accept that there is a public interest in making these decisions transparent. And I think our feeling, and I think the mood of the
time.
The mood of the chamber is to make this transparent. I think I will certainly enable these discussions and investigations to go forward, and that may be the end result we should see.
Councillor Bick.
Welcome the support for the motion. Hope that we can possibly for everyone to support it. And just an idea to leave on the table, that was a follow-on from the conversation. I wonder if the City Council should seek some sort of associate links with the London group that's working on these issues, because it does seem that we, as a part of the country, have a lot in common with the threats that they have on the same policies. But thank you very much for the support expressed so far.
I'll now go to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, thank you.
Is anyone saying written questions? Members of the Vice, there are no written questions. The next speaker meeting of the councillors on the 20th of October 2016.